ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Board of Adjustment meeting of May 18th, 2020. I'll go ahead and ask that the roll be called.
Yes, sir. Pancho Abram. Richard Norton.
Here.
Jose Gonzalez. Here. Javier Martinez.
Present.
Louis Legault.
Here.
Joey Tellez.
Present.
Javier Compián. Present. David Montes.
Present.
Osvaldo Lara. For the record, we do have quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Mato. If everybody can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item we have is the approval of the minutes from last week, and I think we basically have decided not to recommend at this point, but we may have to do it at some point, the amendment to the city ordinance providing for a minimum of 7 votes regardless of what the quorum was at a meeting, and this is a perfect example of that meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Just a status update. That ordinance was taken to city council and it was passed.
Oh, it did?
As presented to them.
Oh, so,
So that was this past Monday's meeting.
So it governs this meeting as well?
It technically wouldn't take effect until publication, however, the state law still stands.
okay, so we have 7 at this meeting. What would be an affirmative vote? Would it still be 75% of the members, or
It
75%?
would be 100%.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay. Wow. Well, all right, good. Okay, well, our minutes were nonetheless to not approve that proposed amendment. That was our recommendation. Was that recommendation presented to the city?
So, okay, so we took it to, I presented it to the attorneys, the other attorneys, and to the council, and, you know, they didn't have an issue with change, so.
Okay, well,
And they did not approve the alternate,
That's gonna be
Alternative.
because we didn't have it on the agenda for that, but we are gonna bring that back because they did like the idea of that.
okay.
So we will be putting that back.
All right.
So are you going to abstain?
well, that becomes a problem again. If I abstain, then basically.
There's no point in having the meeting.
Yeah, there's no point because we won't get to 7 anyway.
But I don't
Of
think-
course, I was always of the opinion that sort of changes the state law from 75, at least for quorums where we have a quorum meeting, to 100%, at least in a 7 quorum, you know.
And that's where alternates work out in this case, where when we know we have 2 missing, we can call the alternate, get them in here, and that way we always have.
Well, what would you
full
suggest we do with this item? Because if I have to abstain,
I don't believe there's a reason for you to abstain. I just don't see that you have any financial connection,
No.
which is typically, you know, reason for it. You know, we don't.
I don't
see
think
that.
you should abstain.
Okay.
Everybody here is telling you you don't have to.
okay,
If
well
you
then
want to.
let's go ahead and I guess, why don't we hear the presentation, since we've got everybody here. But we had a motion and a second, we didn't get a vote on the approval of the minutes from last time.
So, or
We had a motion and a
Just need to
second.
vote.
Everybody
We just need to vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll move on to the second item, which is consideration of the following. It's discussion and possible recommendation on proposed ordinance amending City of Laredo Land Development Code Section 24.1.3.1. Oh, excuse me. That's amending Chapter 28 entitled Sign Regulations by granting a variance to the LED light emitting diode off-premise sign requirements on Lot 1, Block 1, Lago del Mar, Unit 15, 7609 Bartlett, to allow an LED off-premise sign.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. So, overview, the applicant is Store All, LTD. They're the owner. Alice Warstock is the applicant, and Antonio Sanguilina is the representative. The property description and location is Lot 1, Block 1, Lago de Mar Subdivision, Unit 15, located at 7609 Bartlett Avenue. The request is to allow an LED off-premise sign on a road classified as a minor arterial. Clarification, the lot located adjacent to 80-foot wide right-of-way, which is the comprehensive plans classified as a collector. The applicant's position, the applicant requests for the following variance. The proposed LED off-premise sign to be located at 7609 Bartlett Avenue, which is not located on a modified major arterial as required by the sign regulations of the ordinance number 2017-0044. This is the aerial view. This was the zoning map. There were some complications, but you can go ahead and find the zoning map on your packet.
In your packet.
This is the street view. This is the billboard site location. These are the set of plans. Board of Authority to grant the variance. Laredo Down Development Code allows the Board of Adjustments to grant the variance in applicable cases that the strict enforcement of this ordinance shall deny the property owner the use of his property for any reasonable use. Staff recommendation. Staff does not support the proposed variance for the following reasons. There are no peculiar and unusual circumstances associated with the property which would prevent the reasonable use of land if a variance were not granted. The property meets a minimum width of 46 feet for a B3 zone district as per the Laredo Land Development Code section 24.77. The property width is approximately 103.49 feet. The denial of this proposed variance does not prevent the reasonable use of land. 4. Off-premise signs on a road classification of a minor arterial are not allowed as per the sign ordinance 2017-0044 under Article 2, Division 2, Section 28.23. Definitions and requirements. Sign ordinance states a billboard sign shall be permitted only along a major modified arterial or greater as designated in the city's therefore plan as they currently exist or may be amended. This is a sign ordinance for the billboard definition. This is section 2838, a permitted sign dimensions of an off-premise sign. This is the comprehensive plans and the thoroughfare plans definition of width of the right-of-way, where it shows a principal arterial and above it's 100 feet. This is the property location on Bartlett Avenue. The right-of-way is 80 feet above the creek.
And you see it has collector, right? Doesn't it show?
It shows a collector, yes, it does. Not mistaken somewhere.
I had it right above there.
It was.
It doesn't show
It
there.
doesn't show on the image. This is the property location, and the highlighted portion is the creek. Anything below the creek is 100 feet.
So if you look, the property is located above the creek in the 80-foot collector section, and below the creek is the 100-foot section.
These are the dimensional standards. A B3 allows for a minimum lot width of 46 feet. These are examples of a narrow lot. 5305 McPherson Road, the property width is 50 feet. This property meets a minimum lot width of 46 feet for a B3 zone as per the Land Development Code. And the use is apartments. This is another example as to the property width being 99 feet on 2420 Jacomero Road. This property has a width of 99 and parking and maneuvering requirements have been met. The proposed motion.
That's it, to approve or deny?
Okay, well, does anybody have any questions of staff?
So this was a major arterial,
So, on the thoroughfare plan,
what would be the recommendation if it was a major arterial?
If it was a major arterial, it would have been approved. And we wouldn't be here. The permit would have been approved.
Okay, if it's a minor arterial like this is,
It's,
did you put a regular billboard up, or is it just because it's LED?
no, it's not allowed under minor arterial.
if you
You
look
can
over
see
to
right
the,
up there. That's where they're allowed.
What constitutes a major arterial? Is it the amount of traffic going through or
The comp plan classifies them by width,
by width?
by width.
So my issue with this and being the Board of Adjustments, bringing something to you all, I try to look for a hardship. And we've talked about this before. And if there is a hardship, then we bring it to you all. If there is no hardship, it's hard for me to bring an item to you because there's no hardship. A no is not a hardship. Somebody telling you no is not a hardship, okay? You have to provide me the information that shows me that there is a hardship in this case. And there was nothing present unless it's gonna be presented right now, but nothing was presented. So, it's very difficult for me to even see this item come forward to you all. But at the request of the applicant, we bring it to you, but, there is no hardship. If you were to ask me right now, why did you put this on here? What's the hardship? I don't have an answer for that, because there is no hardship.
Well, Mr. Nava, you basically wouldn't have a choice. If an applicant wants to appeal, you have no choice but to allow that appeal.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But I did notice that there was some other stated reasons why the permit was not granted, and it said something about the proposed plans not having the address of the sign and the engineer's seal. Have those things been corrected?
So that was done, in order to get to this point here, there has to be a denial.
Right.
So all that information was presented to the building department, and at the building department, they determined based on the information that it was denied, it wasn't allowed. That's what triggered them to come forward to the Board of Adjustments. But that information has not been cleared yet.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions of staff? If not, I think I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So
Before I do that, can I maybe just add one thing in the motion to open the public hearing? Can I ask that the 3-minute per speaker rule that seems to be a constant at the city, that we waive that for these hearings because we're a one matter hearing board. We're gonna waive that 3-minute rule if that can
So
be part
can
of
we
the
make the motion with that stipulation?
I'd like for you to do
Okay,
that.
I'll make it with that stipulation.
Okay,
To-
so
that we
open the
do-
public hearing?
Yeah.
Do I have a second? Yeah, Mr. Norton seconds it. All in favor to open the public hearing?
Aye.
Okay, well, who would want to go first? Is anybody want to speak for the,
Just real quick, just to introduce the people who are
Okay.
sitting here. John Hickle, who's our building director. Is it Sonia? Last name?
Marquez.
Marquez. She's the examiner that examined this case.
okay,
And Jerry Pinzon, who's our building official.
okay.
Newly crowned, I guess. He had to pass a test, and he did. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
It's a big test. It's a big test.
Okay. So is there anybody that wants to speak for the approval of the variance? If you
Absolutely.
could introduce yourself?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Good afternoon. Danny Tijerina for the record, and I've been hired by Robert Achard to assist Mr. Warstack and himself through this variance process on this billboard. And I'm here to speak in favor. And I have a presentation. Can I
Go.
give that? Okay. And is it okay if I?
If you, you may have a seat, and if you want, if you can get your stuff on the screen, that's,
I think he handed out.
Okay.
Copied to everybody.
Yes, okay.
So,
You know, initially I wanted to do that, but I was told by the staff that the system wasn't working, so we got hard copies instead. So, well, a lot of the information in here has already been sort of discussed, you know, as part of the process, right? A quick overview. Property owner is Mrs. Alice Warstack, Store Unlimited. If approved, the sign operator would be Char Media, Mr. Robert Char. I've been hired as a consultant. I'm a city planner by trade. I've been in city planning for almost 10 years, so just hired to, you know, help them through this, you know, challenging process, if you will. The proposal is for a digital billboard in the location 7609 North Bartlett. So if you look at the aerial, you can see Delmar to the north. And so our site where the arrow is at is basically on the northern section of Bartlett, which is about 650 feet north of the Bartlett Extension, the one that was built 5, 6, 7 years ago. Obviously, it's a commercial corridor. Everything around there is commercial in nature. Okay. If I'm going too fast, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Okay. I do want to be conscious of your time. So our request, as already stated, is for an exception to the literal interpretation of the sign ordinance and for the granting of a variance to the roadway classification standard. So in essence, right, in order to erect a billboard in the city of Laredo, is you need 3 major things, right? It has to be platted, you need to have the zoning for, you need to meet the spacing requirements. And in this case, which we've learned, is billboards can only be erected on certain roadways. Okay? Right? So it's platting, zoning, spacing requirements, which is really the golden rule in the billboard business, and now obviously roadway classification. We're essentially asking for a variance to build this billboard on a minor arterial, which is just under the roadway classification that is needed, right? So just to give you a sense, transportation engineers have established a hierarchy when it comes to roadway classifications. Okay, so you have local roads, collectors, arterials, which have subcategories, minor, modified major, major. Okay, and so obviously they all function differently. They have different amount of lanes, right away. Some provide more mobility, more access, but they vary, right? So in essence, the Bartlett Extension was designed and built as a major arterial. Okay, now this is going to sound a bit strange, but for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but on the thoroughfare plan it's classified as a minor arterial. Now, I spoke to the engineer that designed this roadway. I spoke to David Arredondo from Alexander Development. I spoke to Robert Peña from the traffic department as well. And he told me straight up, he was like, it's 5 lanes. You have 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes southbound. You have a center turning lane. You have 100 feet of right of way. That road should be classified as a major arterial. I think anybody who drives through McPherson knows that, you know, how bad of a traffic problem we have. And so obviously the main purpose of the construction of Bartlett was to serve as a relief route for McPherson, okay? So, you know, so why should this variance be approved? So before I get into that, it's important that I communicate this. So I am an educated, trained, and experienced city planner. I have a master's degree in city planning. I have worked for various cities as a planner. I've served on the P&Z Commission. I worked for the Killen family as a developer, so I've studied this stuff. I've worked in it. I've voted on it. I've fought against it as a developer, so I've seen every facet of this process. Okay? Now, the importance of this is not so much to communicate my qualifications, but more so what I want you all to know is I take this very, very serious, right? So when I started this consulting company, I started it as a city planner. Okay, so before I even, come to the B of A or to the commission or to the city council, I vetted the projects that I take on. And so it's important for you all to know that I would never take on a job that I don't believe in as a city planner. Okay? So with that being said, so let's start with the Bartlett Extension on our property. So I've covered most of the points here. In essence, the roadway was designed and built to accommodate higher traffic volumes. 5 lanes, right? We all know that. Our property is approximately 650 feet north of the Bartlett Extension, across the creek as you showed. Obviously, our property is fronting what's classified as a minor arterial. So in reality, the only difference between the roadway that we front and Bartlett is 20 feet of right-of-way. So it's not like we're coming from a local or collector, right? So it's local, collector, minor arterial, modified major principal. We're basically the next roadway from being approved, if that makes sense. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
Is Delmar a
Yes, sir.
major arterial?
Yes, sir, it is. It is classified, and really, again, the only difference is that it has a center median lane, and it has an extra 20 feet of right-of-way.
And McPherson also is considered a major arterial?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And has almost the same specs as what the Bartlett expansion looks like?
Well, actually, the Bartlett expansion has 100 feet of right-of-way, 5 lanes, identical to Shiloh east of McPherson to McPherson. So technically, again, it's classified as a minor arterial, but if you look at the design and the way it operates, it's functioning as a major arterial.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
But you were talking about what, north of the creek and south of the creek. I think we used the words above and below the creek.
Yes, sir.
Which would be north and south. But so north of the creek, the road slims down to 4 lanes, doesn't it?
Yes, correct.
And the right-of-way doesn't exist anymore at 100, it goes down to 80?
It goes down to 80.
So do you
that's right.
believe that's incorrect planning on the part of the city, that there was an error there or something?
Well, no,
Why was that done that way?
Well, no, obviously that section of roadway was built years ago. Now, what I'm gonna assume is that at some point I would imagine, and that's an excellent point, right? So, granted, we don't have that 20 feet of right-of-way, and we don't have a center turning lane. But if you think about it, right, at a practical level, we're connected to the Bartlett Extension. So effectively, even though we don't have that 20 feet of right-of-way, it's operating as a major arterial. Our section is operating as a major arterial. Now, what I would suspect at some point is if the city's able to acquire the right-of-ways, I would imagine that they would acquire that additional 20 feet so that it could marry up with the new Bartlett Extension.
Is there room available to acquire additional right-of-way?
That is a great question. That's a question from Mr. Navarro.
I mean, isn't there a creek there, like you
I mean,
said?
we'd have to acquire
You
Yeah,
have to
the
acquire-
property. 'cause, I
Probably on
mean,
one side, it's easier.
and the road
than
is
the other
already
side.
only 4 lane, correct?
mhm.
But he has a point that he is coming from a major, collector in that version, in that Bartlett Road, to Delmar, and just that gap in between is,
So if you look at our thoroughfare plan, you'll see that some of our roads start off as one classification, and then as it moves on, it changes classification because you're now in different parts of the city, or that, you know, that's a reason, right? You had that little extension you're talking about up to the creek was the first part that was built. And then after that, the city came in with their funding and built the second part of Bartlett. And they were able to acquire more land. They were dealing with the landowner. I believe that whole track is Alexander.
Correct, yes, sir.
So they were able to talk to them, get the width. Before that, all I could say is they probably did not talk to anybody to try to get more width, or if they did, there was multiple owners, there were buildings already established, and they weren't able to do that. But the idea of a classification changing is common, it happens. It's not just, oh, well, it's, you know, it's a major here, well, just continue to major. There are transitions depending on where it's headed.
But that's not necessarily accurate, because Delmar Boulevard is a major arterial. Delmar Boulevard goes down to 2 lanes, just because the city's never had the pool to buy out the people that live there.
Two different.
It goes,
Yeah.
because it goes from Boulevard to 2 lanes, then it opens back up. So that's not
So
entirely true.
classification is one thing. What you can get as right-of-way, so construction, that's completely another issue.
But technically, on Delmar Boulevard, where you have 2 lanes, the remnants of the old Delmar, I guess, C and B, or whatever part that is, right by Ranquet Field. So somebody there, a landowner, I mean, if they were a B, whatever, well, there's a law office right there on the 2 lanes,
So-
where they have, although their stuff is on site, they have an LED sign.
Excuse me,
And that was,
if you, I'm sorry, if you look at that Delmar Boulevard, where the law office is, going west, the city has that right of way. They've chosen not to, expand it out, but if you look at some of those houses as you're driving west, you'll see they have long front yards. Well, the reality is that half of their front yard is right of way that belongs to the city, all the way down. I believe it ends a block away from Mary Health, if you're going westbound. But if you drive, you'll see that the city owns that right away, so they have the width. They just chosen not to expand out to make it a 5-lane.
But nonetheless, Mr. Navarro, would it be the classification of those streets that controls and not so much the what we think are the widths? I mean, we can see, like Mr. Diaz says, I mean, you see some narrow parts and some wide parts, but isn't it the classification that controls?
You know, what we do is we classify it, we give it a dimension. Specifically Del Mar, that's the higher-ups that determine whether they want to expand it or not. We have the right to go in there, we can expand it, they just haven't done it in years. So what you're talking about is going to somebody's home, knock on their door and say, hey, we're coming in up to this point, you know, which is half their front, maybe even more than half of their front yard, you know. So it's been brought up to the council, they know it's there, the councilman knows he has that right away, but there hasn't been a councilman that's triggered that to find the funding to expand it. And that, I guess that's the third, which funding, you know, can you get the money to widen that? Right now, we're just having problems getting asphalt, so I can tell you, John O'Keefe does not want to get involved in that.
I mean, I guess my point was just originally taking it back was, you made a statement that the designation depends on the width, and it has to be 4 lanes or whatever the case may be, 4 lanes within the middle one.
A major.
For a
Or
major
for it to be a
arterial.
major arterial. And you said regardless of how it constricts or whatever, then it'll change, but that's not entirely accurate. That was my point in saying.
Yeah, I mean-
Because this one is a major arterial, but for, once it crosses the creek, it bumps down just because we're missing a turn lane, which we have highways, we have Business 59, which is Saunders, doesn't always have a turn lane either. And that's a major arterial, or it's not even, it's even above a major arterial, because it's a United States highway. So, kind of, it just sounds like the city's picking and choosing when it changes it.
It's also
from
missing
one-
20 feet of right of way.
And
Beside a turning lane, it's missing 20 feet of right of
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
So it's not just the right of way. That's-
Well,
Which was
Well,
why my
that-
question was more about the amount of traffic that constitutes the major arterial. When do you get to that designation? Is it because of the amount of traffic, or is it only the width, or is it, you know?
Projected amounts?
Yeah.
You know, we look at it there, every year we bring the.
And does that help the determination of major and minor arterials? I mean, I'm just trying to say, when do you reach that classification? This is a major arterial. then.
It is, in a nutshell, Mr. Martinez, typically, historically, is, the design of the roadway is what classifies it. I mean, there are highways all over the country that are massive, that might get, 1,000 cars a day. So it's not necessarily so much the amount of lanes or the volume, but it's typically how the roadways are designed. Is that?
Yeah.
Like for Jackman, for example, it's
Yes.
designed to take some of the burden off of McPherson.
Right.
We also have master plans coming in, so you're having a lot of rooftops coming to the area, so the projection is that it's gonna have a lot of traffic, and so.
And the same for this Bartlett expansion.
So that'll
that
be a
took place. I
major-
mean,
That's correct. So you take that information, you try to design properly to move traffic.
okay.
So if we allow this, are we going to open a can of worms and set a precedence for others to come in and put signs up and down?
Mr. Chairman,
Are there any
you know-
signs there, first of all, on Bartlett? Are there any
In this area.
in this area?
Other than the business signs, but no billboard signs.
And they could be allowed further south, correct? I mean, past the creek, further south of the creek? Would they be allowed?
Depends on where you're talking about.
Well, what we call below the creek, where it starts at 100 feet.
Basically where Clear Choice is, could Clear Choice be
Yeah,
an
like-
offsite?
Yeah, they could, yes.
So we're differentiating over 300 feet, that they're 300 feet too far north.
Well, once again, Board of Adjustments is, we're looking at what is the burden here? What is it that, because this property can be developed. Because if they don't get the sign, doesn't mean this property doesn't work for anybody else. I mean, it's a developable piece of land, okay? And the ordinance is such that a sign doesn't go in this location. So it, in my opinion, it would open a can of worms.
But you mentioned something that the city, as its community, grows and whatever, they come to determination, okay, this is now a major arterial, right? Somewhere that trigger can be pulled and the city can say, this is now a major arterial, and then they would be able to, like Ms. Guerra said, if it's a major arterial, it would have been approved, right? I mean, in all fairness, right? That's a process that could take place over time.
I mean, it could be denied today and a week from now or a month from now.
Or 10 years from now, it
Or
just
10
depends.
years.
But maybe I'm moving too fast, I'm just trying to think it through.
Traffic usually, the traffic director usually will evaluate that.
And when
Lead the
that,
traffic.
when that happens, like to Mr. Monte's point, there's some spacing involved before you can allow the next billboard to come out.
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's all
There
kinds
is.
of issues that come up where you just can't put one 10 feet from there and another one
Yes,
goes
sir.
up.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Now,
I'm
Well, maybe,
There is an ordinance that.
I apologize, Mr. Deacon,
Mr.
getting ahead of ourselves.
I think
I don't know.
Mr. Norton had a good question that I kind of come back to the one difference between what we call a minor and a major arterial and 80 and 100 feet, and why this may be there.
Why not a major, not,
Yeah.
and it's only a
This particular-
small area. Can we get the traffic department to come in and say, hey, this is why we designated it a minor arterial, but
Well,
on
it
the other
could-
side, the major
Show
arterial.
the slide, it shows it'll show you how, yeah, I don't know if you can't zoom into that, right? If you look, the two that she's highlighted are, what's it, Multi-Way Boulevard? And then you look down and it'll tell you the width of the right-of-way, right? So Multi-Way Boulevard, which has nothing to do really here, is greater than 140 feet. The principal arterial is the second column, right, is 100 to 120 feet. The minor arterial is 90 feet, and then the collector is 80 feet.
And this one's 80 feet?
There you go, 80 feet. We're at an 80-foot section.
now,
I'd like to just chime in real quick because I think Louis asked a question. I'd like to give you a little bit of historical perspective.
Can I just ask if you say your name?
Yeah, you can introduce yourself.
Curtis Forstack. I'm one of the owners of Storall LTD, the applicant. So when we bought the land next door, Alice and I did, in 2000. And the land on the east and west side of Bartlett on the segment that we're talking about was owned by the same group of developers, Dale Troutman and Steve Whitworth and a group of those guys. And my understanding is they built that section of Bartlett so that they could sell the land that they owned there. And I don't know why they only, dedicated an 80-foot right-of-way, but you can't drive from Fenwick to Delmar. And in other words, all the traffic that goes from Fenwick to Delmar passes through our segment, and it's the same quantity of traffic. So that's all I wanted to add.
Well, I can tell you why they built the 80. Because the future thoroughfare map required a collector there on that property, and that's why the 80-foot right-of-way was required. So that's why they built it. And that's where, and it shows it on the plat
At a minimum,
as an 80.
at a minimum.
Yes.
They could have done more, but
They could have.
Is this the sign?
No, I don't think the sign is constructed.
This is an example.
Sir.
Those are not ours, sir. Those are Mr. Denina's.
well, yeah, these are,
This is an example.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, correct.
let me ask Mr. Warsack, so this property that's, looks like about 105 feet by 460, 450 feet, it's a proposed mini storage, or you're gonna put a mini storage there, a storage?
That was the concept.
Storage
yeah.
units?
But we wanted to maximize the revenue from the project, and we wanted to put a sign on it to generate additional revenue, because it is a small, narrow tract, and it's, the capacity of storage that we can put on there is limited.
And across the street, isn't there like a church?
There's
or
a church.
It's a church.
with-
Yeah, and it has access right in front of you, or where's their access? Because are we gonna see northbound traffic waiting in a left turn, in a left lane instead of a middle lane, to turn into the church, for example? Seeing,
The church, I don't think I understand your question. The church has access from the west side of Bartlett. They have two approaches, at least two.
There you go.
Put the area.
Okay, yeah, that church there.
I think at the far south, they also have a driveway right there.
Isn't there already a storage next to Holland Engineering in that area?
That would be,
Yes,
Isn't
sir.
there?
It belongs.
Yeah.
We own and operate that storage
okay.
facility.
Does anybody have any other comments? Anybody else that want to speak for the item?
Can I proceed with?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
presentation?
sure.
Okay, thank you. So, on page 6, our assessment on Bartlett and the site, right? So, McPherson is obviously still struggling with congestion. It is our opinion that new investment and development along Bartlett will fuel further investment and development along Bartlett Route. Obviously, activity, whether in a neighborhood, on a roadway, right, gets other people interested, right? So when you have more investment, more development like this, other people are gonna come in, start developing, right? So the idea is, hopefully, in the near future, by supporting these types of projects, other people are gonna come in here, continue to develop, and now Bartlett will actually begin to act like the relief route that it was intended to be. This roadway was $9 million, and the city put up 50% of this for two major purposes: as a relief route and to encourage and incentivize development. And, I mean, this is exactly what we're doing with this, right? Is this billboard is an investment, it is development, and by investing in this area, by building in this area, right, where eventually people are gonna drive through here, use it more, and so it's effectively gonna do what it's supposed to do, and now our tax dollars are being used properly, right? I don't think Bartlett is providing the relief it should right now, just because it doesn't have enough development on there, right? Now, I did wanna touch on Mr. Montes. You made a good point, Mr. Montes, on opening up a can of worms, but I will tell you that there is a tremendous amount of interest for other signs along Bartlett. Okay, so
What's the zoning there? It's like commercial?
we are zone B3. Actually, the entirety from Fenwick all the way to Del Mar, 90% of it is B3. So, I mean, it's entirely commercial nature. So it's a commercial corridor. It's meant to serve these types of purposes, right? And so really the only thing preventing us from being able to build this billboard is 20 feet of right of way, right? Now, I did want to bring this up because I think this is very, very important, is we have some recent precedents. Okay, so in October 2018, this board approved an off-premise, a digital billboard on San Bernardo, which has 60 feet of right-of-way and has 2 lanes and is classified as a collector. Okay? 2 lanes, collector, 60 foot of right-of-way. We have 80, we have 4 lanes, we're classified as a minor arterial. Now, on top of that, if you go to, you'll see the page where Jackman is at. The city of Laredo built and allowed that digital billboard right there to promote the NBA and is now promoting off-premise businesses. And Jackman is a collector. So, you know, it was done on San Bernardo. It was done by the city of Laredo. And so, you know, the argument is not so much give it to us because you already gave it to them, right? I think that's one part of it, but it's also, you know, give it to us because it's been given to them, but because we know it works. It's been done. I mean, it was done by the city of Laredo, a collector. And they actually have a lower classification than our roadway does.
And
And the
a
city
much
did that.
larger sign,
How much longer what?
larger sign.
I just, this board, this group, I don't think this is the place for this item. There's some points that, yes, the council can make adjustments to the ordinance to make this happen. That's where it can be done. He was denied because he didn't meet the ordinance. Once again, to bring it to you all, it's gotta be a hardship. There is no hardship here. I can't, unless, I haven't heard of what the hardship is
However-
other than 20 feet, but
Well,
that could be taken care of outside of here with city council to adjust the ordinance based on some of the information he's saying with some experts that are on his team. They could come to the table. I know that the experts were in the room at planning and zoning to create the sign ordinance, and that's where it was taken care of. I mean, a lot of work went into that. And everybody came forward and they made the adjustments the way it should be done. But what's happening here is take it to building, get it denied, and we'll go to the Board of Adjustments. This is not the forum for this type of thing.
Wasn't that
unless there
one of
was a
the
hardship.
eccentricities of our ordinance, that in and of itself, signs were always gonna come to the BLA instead of going to some other body?
It goes to the city manager's office and it comes here. And
Yeah, city manager, exactly.
That's right.
And we saw that before with the denial by the city manager. And what is the remedy if we deny, Mr. Navarro?
Well, we could,
They can appeal to court. They'll go to court.
Are the neighboring businesses aware of what's going on when they mailed
No.
notice to come and
Notice to the
speak for
neighborhood
or
is not
against?
required for the Board of Adjustment.
It's not required to notify the First Baptist Church and to
No,
notify?
sir. No, sir.
It's not required?
No, sir.
Why would it not be required?
The state doesn't
Well,
require
they
it.
don't know. They don't know what we're
No,
doing.
They don't know if there's gonna be a sign.
It was posted, but it is, they do not receive neither newspaper nor mail out notice.
Only zone changes do that.
Zone changes and historic.
can I just make a comment?
That's
So,
special use permit.
Well, those are, it's a zoning,
We
they're
have
handled,
gotten 2 special
they're
use permits.
handled under zoning
And I
as
know
well.
that they mail that notice that goes as
so,
well.
so Mr. Navarro keeps harping on this hardship, right? The Worstacks made an investment here they acquired this property, thinking that, they were gonna be able to expand their storage operation and build a digital billboard, right? Hardship aside, given the current economic climate and what we may be facing here pretty soon, I mean, we have an investor who is ready and willing to do a deal. And in my opinion, I think more than ever, we should support individuals like the Worstacks, like the Robert Achars of the world, who are investing in our community. Now, I do want to touch on it. So if you turn to page, the one that says standards for granting a variance, and I'm sure you all know this. It is page, sorry, I missed I'm just going to read it to you all. And this is straight from the Land Development Code. When making this standards for granting variances, these are basically the standards that this board should make when you're evaluating a variance, okay? Is the variance in line with the spirit and the intent of the ordinance? In my professional opinion, there is no doubt in my mind that it is, and I'll touch on that on the next slide. Now, you need to make sure that residential property values are protected. We're on a commercial corridor. There's no residential anywhere in sight, right? The health and safety of the general citizen. Now, digital billboards are all over Laredo now. They're commonplace. If they were unsafe, if they were dangerous, the city council would have banned them already. All right? Will this decision impact culture, historic aspects of the city? Absolutely not. And will it impact the character of the neighborhood? It won't, because, I mean, this entire corridor is commercial in nature. Now, if it was a residential area, I would have never brought this to you all, right? But if you look at the standards that should guide your decision-making when granting a variance, I mean, we meet all the standards. So just because a hardship doesn't exist, if you look at this, all these boxes are checked. And the only thing coming between us and this project is basically 20 feet of right-of-way and a planning director who's just stuck on this hardship deal, and so I'd like to make one last point, if I may. The spirit and intent of the ordinance is very, very important. When I was city planner in North Texas, we draft these ordinances, okay? I've drafted zoning ordinances, subdivision ordinances. Right now, you can't get everything, right? So not every project is gonna fit in this box. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, what we have to do is evaluate the spirit and the intent of the ordinance. And does this violate the spirit and intent? In my professional opinion, it does not. It's not hurting property values, it's not affecting the general welfare, it's not endangering people, it's not breaking the spacing standards, which is huge. On the San Bernardo billboard, not only did this board grant that variance on a collector, but there was a billboard 300 feet away. It broke the spacing standards as well. 2018, and so it's not, our position again is we're not asking for anything out of the ordinary. We're coming to this board because we hit, an obstacle, if you will. But it's been done. It was done in 2018. It was done by the city of Laredo on a collector, and we know it works. So, at the end of the day, if the city can do it, why couldn't, Mr. Warstack and Mr. Char do it?
So, knowing that he's a planner, because he stated that several times, he knows the system. I'm not saying that some of his arguments aren't valid, but there's an approach to this. You take it to the P&Z Commission, you talk to the council, you talk to the city manager, you talk to the traffic department, you adjust the ordinance accordingly. There is a place to do that. They fail to want to do that, but there is a place to do that. To bring up some of the questions you all have, which would be asked by the P and Z Commission. There is a proper way of doing this. This is not the approach. As a planner, a guy who's created ordinances, he understands the process, he understands how it goes. And like he said, ordinances aren't 100%, and they can be tweaked, or maybe by years, it's an ordinance that's been around forever that was never adjusted. It can be done. It's just this is not the form to do that. But they fail to want to go that process.
Well, no, Mr. Montes, I think you had a question. I was kind of curious what you were going to say.
Light pollution, does this sign run 24/7? And so is the issue of light pollution coming to question here? I don't know. I don't see any residential homes, and that's why I wanted to, was concerned about the neighboring church, how they feel about this, and that you say it's not legal to send them a
that
notice
it's
to
not
come
legal,
to
it's just
speak
not
for or
required.
against. It's not required to come and speak for or against, so they don't know what's going on.
That's correct, sir.
And then if we allow this to happen, then it's on us. And you keep saying that there's another avenue, or so why are we here?
Well, I want to just back up Mr. Navarro on one thing. When you talk about hardship, I think it's the same old thing that's been drilled in our heads for years, as long as I've been here, is the unusual nature of the property, such that without the granting of a variance, you couldn't have any reasonable use of the property. That's the rule. That the property has to be such that if we deny them this particular variance, or a particular variance that they're asking for, that they wouldn't be able to use the property in a reasonable way. That's the standard, and that's the hardship that I think Mr. Navarro talks about. Not a hardship, an actual, gee, there's a hardship. No, you just don't meet the first test, which is there's something unusual or strange or peculiar about the property, such that the denial would deny you the reasonable use of it.
And I don't know
So
if you'll-
that's the first standard, and that's where I think you get to that we don't run past that standard first.
And if you recall, there was a meeting that we actually brought an item to the agenda, and it was actually kicked back to us. And you all didn't take any action because the committee thought, this is not our jurisdiction, and it was kicked back, and we had to go to the building department and work it out with the applicant, so we've had that happen because there was no.
Well, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing, and if there's no more public comments.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Char would like to.
Oh, okay.
Can I-
If you could say your name?
Robert HR. Can I talk about these photos?
Sure.
These photos are a little more, a lot less detailed, more practical, not as dry as what's been talked about. I want to mention that when it comes to signage, the spacing is what's important. We are not any closer to the right-of-way just because this is a 20-foot difference. In other words, I am meeting the standard, if this is allowed, I am meeting the standard on being so far away from the right-of-way. If you travel on San Bernardo or Jacqueline or this portion of Bartlett, you're not any closer or distracted because of this signage. This signage eats up more linear feet on both sides of the roadway than any other type of signage, and this is the smallest possible platform for this type of signage. So, it does not open a can of worms because it will encompass both sides of the highway as far as spacing is concerned. As far as lumens and light pollution, that is regulated by the city. And I have a phone number at the state where they call me 24 hours if something goes out of whack, and I've got to fix it immediately or I get fined. On other signage that's state signage, this signage comes under the same lumens that are controlled by the city. The church that is located off of Shiloh has on-premise signage. That signage lumens are way beyond my lumens. This is the size of signage. And I took a picture of the bus shelter because that will give you an idea of how small the signage is. This is not signage that just got erected on Shiloh that is 3 times bigger. This is limited in size. This signage is what you see on McPherson, where it says Castellano Carpenter. Castellano Carpenter owns a business on McPherson, and he can direct traffic to his business on McPherson. But because of 20 feet, you're preventing that along Bartlett. So if you go to this last page, the Clear Choice business, there's multiple businesses in that complex, and this gentleman here just said Clear Choice, but you probably don't know that there's 6 businesses there. You don't know because Bartlett is being prevented from advertising those businesses the way Castellano Carpenter was. That, to me, is a hardship that extends beyond Bruce Workstaff's pocketbook. It's an immediate hardship over 20 feet. This business here called Honey, they don't sell honey. It's a business for females to go get Botox, or she can't advertise on Bartlett to talk about what she does inside that business. That, to me, is a hardship that extends beyond his pocketbook. That's the way I view it, because I'm in advertising. And people that spend money on advertising are investing in their business. They don't continue to advertise. If they spend $5, they better get $25 back. If not, they're not going to advertise. And yet, on Rocio, now Rocio can get, these businesses are tucked away on Rocio. These businesses can expose themselves on McPherson. They could now expose themselves on Bartlett. So if you're State Farm, or if you're the consulting business, now you can have your business shown on a platform that is very small and very, very restricted, up to 24 businesses with 4 images per business. That, to me, you're creating a hardship by denying. That's the way I look at it, because I deal with the businesses. So all this detail about foot here or foot there, it doesn't make sense to me. And when I hear that there's no hardship, I see it differently, because I know what these businesses need. If not, I wouldn't spend $250,000 on Bartlett. They want exposure in other areas. Think about this new shopping center on Belmont Road. It's called Emani Shopping Center. Let's just say that you're traveling down this great artery, which is Bartlett, and you're now going to the left at the end of Bartlett and Del Mar. Every business at Emani Shopping Center can now say on Bartlett, hang a right and come get a haircut. Isn't that a hardship? And the same for this new business that's going to locate by Cresta Advisors. If you have to hang a right to go into Winfield, now on Bartlett, they're going to say, hang a left, and they could advertise up to 4 services there on 4 different slides on a small platform. So,
Let me ask you a question. This Crest Advisor, there's a billboard right there.
yes,
Is that correct?
that's an on-premise one.
I see.
That is the same size as this. And if you'll notice the size, it's not a very big size.
I mean, you're taking a picture
But
far away and.
That billboard only allows 2 people on there. It's not digital.
No, it's not.
So digital allows, now a person, I go to a business and they say, wow, you've got this digital platform, I can show that I cut hair, I wash hair, I do blowout, I do Botox, they can do all of that. And yet they're denied that, over 20 feet.
Again, I just don't understand your business, but I'm gonna ask. It's an on-premise and it's not digital. But if they wanted to change it, or not, could they change it
The
to digital?
spacing is, the spacing would not allow it.
What spacing? There's nothing here.
There's a
You mean
digital,
changing the
there's a
ad?
digital billboard within 1,500 feet of that that sucks that up. Digital billboards are very versatile. They're really good, but the spacing is very, very extreme. For example, state highway, 300-foot spacing, but if you make it digital, it sucks up 1,500 feet, 3,000 feet. You're not talking about a proliferation of billboards on Bartlett, that's not gonna
And an
happen.
on-premise sign is for those particular owners, correct? You can't,
An on-premise is only used by the owner.
right, you can't advertise other businesses on that and
What you-
on-premise
What
sign.
you see on Shiloh, what you see on McPherson, tons of grandfathered signs under an old ordinance.
And the one that's on Jackman and McPherson, there's a billboard, electric,
Yes,
LED.
yes.
That's okay because that's on.
That meets the
McPherson.
spacing. There's another 1,000-foot away, but the digital format, nobody could put a digital in that direction for 1,500 feet on each side of that board for 3,000 feet.
That was
So-
part of the ordinance that was created.
Right, right. So here's what happens, that you've got a bunch of grandfathered signage. That's not gonna happen on Bartlett. It can't. Now, it could happen if they were static. Then you could put them on both sides of the roadway all over the place. But not if you put up digital.
And if you get variances. And if you get a variance to all those separation.
You wouldn't need a
distances.
variance.
Well,
You
there
know,
is a
not
separation
south
distance.
south of the creek, you wouldn't need a variance.
Well, depending on its classification.
Well, I mean, that's hypothetical.
So one of the areas that, and I, you know, Mr. Char has done billboards all over town, I know he does good billboards, that we're not here to question his standards when he's building. But the ordinance was put in to control the signs, I'm gonna say 2006, 2007.
It's a new ordinance.
I could be wrong on that ordinance, but it was to control the signs and space them out and provide some kind of order for the signs, because the competition was fierce. But, so the city came in with an ordinance to control the signs. You know, advertisement has changed over the years, you know, with cell phones now, with all the advertisement you get on that. Newspapers are not getting the ads that they used to. We're trending away from the old standard of advertising. It's become much more difficult, I believe. So, should we be considering more billboards, or should we be considering less billboards? Because now advertisements change. You know, a lot of people follow this. I know one of those businesses that's in here that doesn't have a billboard is thriving. They're hitting record numbers, even through COVID. No billboard. So, you know, you can argue, well,
Well, I think the hardship was maybe not the hardship that's created by not being able to advertise your services or not being able to get as known as, but it's the hardship of the particular characteristics of the property that we have to come back to.
That's right.
And I know that we keep getting that beat in our head, but boy, that was beat in our head a lot, you know?
For a whole year?
Yeah, so I keep coming back to that, and that's the hardship, I think, of not a hardship of not being able to do advertise as you may want to, or have the best advertising, but the particular peculiar nature of the property. That's what we got. Anyway, so I guess I'll go ahead again and move to close the public hearing. If there's anybody else who wants to speak in favor of the item, If not, I'll go ahead and take a motion to close the public hearing. I have a motion, second to close the public hearing. All in favor of closing the public hearing? Opposed? Okay, so I guess I'll I'll have to entertain a motion to either grant or deny the variance.
Or table.
Or table. Now, if we table, well, again, remember the rules about tabling. We can table to a specific time or a specific meeting or just table in general. Now, what Mr. Navarro said was something that I was thinking of. Maybe that portion of that property can be reviewed, that portion of that road can be reviewed, you know. Maybe ask that it be recharacterized or reclassified in that instance, Mr. Navarro, as some kind of a major, bump it up from a minor to a major, or because of the, well, basically the amount of traffic on it, which would be the same amount of traffic south of the creek, you know. That it be bumped up to a major arterial or something. I don't know what the, you know that there's something else that can be done there, maybe, so.
I think Mr. Norton's point is well taken, that it gives an opportunity for staff in whatever department, whether it be traffic or whatever, to try to reevaluate. I think considering Mr. Tijerina's presentation as well, you know, that this is the characteristics of a major arterial, and it's more than likely gonna progress to that particular designation. And if that could happen, that I would move to give, you know, even up to 90 days of a postponement, so that kind of, you know, because it's more than one, I think it's more interdepartmental, it's not just one department that has to go through this.
Right. We got
So,
that.
to give them sufficient time to kind of evaluate that, so that maybe this is where the solution really lies.
I think that's where the solution is.
But, I mean, maybe 90 days is
Mr.
too much,
Norton,
but
do you
I,
want to make a motion to table, Mr. Norton?
I move that we table the motion.
And
For
a
90
motion
days.
to table, there's no discussion, there's a motion to table, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Martinez seconds. All in favor of tabling? Mr. Navarro, excuse me.
Just, so we try to work on this. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen,
It comes
We
back.
come back.
It comes back.
It comes back.
Table it for 90 days, within 90 days.
Okay, so that's a
Otherwise,
motion
if you
to
turn
table
it
for a
down, you
date
gotta go to
certain.
court.
If possible, we could table this to the August meeting of the BOA, Mr. Navarro. That would be Mr. Norton's motion to table it for 90 days, or till the, what would be 3 meetings from now, which would be the August meeting. Would that be okay, Mr. Norton?
Sure.
Could I say that your motion would be to table it to the August meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so there's a motion to table to the August meeting. Would you agree with that, Mr.
I second.
Mr. Martinez?
Yeah.
There's a second. All in favor of tabling it to the August meeting?
No,
Aye.
Was that all in favor?
Was that all in favor? I didn't see Mr.
That's
State.
yeah,
Okay, thank you. That was all in favor.
okay.
And with that, I guess I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
that's it, sir.
A motion to adjourn, Mr. Norton second, all in favor?
We have some cold food for you if you.